It has been a couple weeks since we did one of these, but I want to talk about Daredevil Born Again before the season finale. So this is everything from 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Everything up till episode 8. We're not talking about 9. We'll talk about 9 next week. And I have 3 videos that cover episodes 1, 2, and 3. But there's obviously been a big gap for a bunch of reasons. Number 1, I've been very busy. Number 2, I've been pretty sick. Number 3, the release schedule's been a little weird because it's been like 1 episode and then 2 episodes some weeks, and it just got kind of messy. I didn't have a ton to say about certain episodes, but we're going to talk about all 5 episodes. That is 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Leading up to 9. And if you're like, hey, is this because that person Cibus, C-I-B-U-S, on the Nando V Movies Discord, which you should all join, the links in the description for all the videos, asked in the video section if I'm going to do a Daredevil recap leading up to the finale? The answer is yes, kind of. I did want to do this, but also I had some free time, so here we go. Also, Mortimer was not going to let me talk about Daredevil without him being in the room, because of course we're going to talk about episode 4 first, and that's the one of the ones that has the White Tiger in it, the new White Tiger, I guess. I think this character is Ava Ayala. I'm not sure, because there have been a couple of Ayalas named, but this is the youngest one, and she presumably will be the new White Tiger going forward. And here he is, by the way. Look at this guy. He's a tiger, all right. Meow, 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 meow. So sweet. All right, so episode 4. Each one of these I'm going to talk about just kind of what the general idea of the episode was, how it led into the season, and I want to talk about one character in every episode who I thought stood out. So this is the Punisher episode. This was everything off of that first arc, which was the original White Tiger arc, wrapping that up, although not completely wrapping it up. We had Matt investigating the Bullet, we had Matt doing some other lawyer stuff, and this is where we got a lot more of this Gandolfini character. I think the name is Daniel Blake. I keep in my head wanting to say Donald Blake, but that's Thor. I think this character's interesting, because a lot of these characters that we're spending time with that are new in season 1 of Born Again feel like characters that are plucked from seasons 1, 2, or 3 of just regular Daredevil. For instance, Buck Cashman feels like Wesley 2.0, right? And not that we need these characters, but just like it feels like they kind of knew we need to put a Wesley character in to facilitate stuff. So we'll use this character, Buck Cashman. And for that reason, I don't dislike that character. I find him, kind of not as fun as Wesley, but fine. But it's a character that I feel like I already I'm pretty familiar with, whereas this Daniel Blake character feels completely out of nowhere and also incredibly contemporary, and I'm interested in his insanely rapid ascent. This is one of those things where, like, Wilson Fisk is mayor, and we're going to see this through this season, because the scope of this show is small. And what I mean is, obviously, it's got a huge scope, right? Because this is all of New York. We're covering lots of space, lots of time, but in terms of, like, we see Fisk with his one chief of staff person, Buck Cashman, his bodyguard or whatever. I'm not even sure what his job is, his fixer. And then this other guy, this kid, who's like, oh man, Mr. Fisk, I love you. You're the best Fisk I've ever even seen. And that seems to be all of the people he deals with on a daily basis. And I don't know a whole lot about the mayor, but I feel like the episode where we saw him going to schools and just getting sung to, and he hated it, that feels like what his job is most of the time. But it also feels like there would just be way more people that would constantly be pulling him in different directions. And I don't think it's unbelievable that Daniel Blake is able to rise so high in this organization so fast. It's just like, where are the rest of the people working for Wilson Fisk? And I get it, we're going to only show a couple that are important. I guess I kind of felt like he works the same way like a mobster usually works in a movie or show like this. But did you feel like a politician, especially the mayor of New York City, would have way more people buzzing around? That would make it harder for him to do crimes, but also, I'd be interested to see what his staff is like outside of characters that we're spending all of this time with. Has he fired all the rest of his traditional staff members, or is it just a bunch of Daniels, right? We don't know that, and I'd be curious to learn more about that. I think what he's doing with Adam is interesting. I like that this version of Wilson Fisk, and all versions of Wilson Fisk, feel very principled, right? They talk about all their big ideas and their plans and what they want, and people from when he grew up, when he was a boy and stuff. But in reality, like, he is a person, and he has all these urges that he cannot fight, and that is a big theme of Born Again, or season 1, is the idea that Matt and Fisk both have this gravity that is pulling them in these directions that they want to escape, and they just are not able to, and it threatens to tear apart all of their relationships. I think that's interesting. I don't think that's that different from a lot of stuff we've already covered with both of these characters in previous seasons. This is one of those things with Matt. I get why he can't be Daredevil, right? I get why we have to have characters say, Matt, don't be Daredevil, and he has to go, but I really want to be a Daredevil. But it does feel like, because he's died and quit so many times, like, this character, just let him be Daredevil. God, I don't need him to have like a little assistant or something. It's just like we've gone through the same cycle over and over and over again. But okay, the absolute standout of this episode is a character played by an actress named Elizabeth E. Davis. This character's name is Sophia, and this is the clerk or something who Matt flirts with to get the sentence reduced for the guy that stole the caramel corn. I love Matt Murdock flirting. And like, listen, I'm not completely against Heather. I do think she made a bunch of very interesting decisions in episode 8, but I think she and Matt have chemistry, and I like that. However, Sophia and Matt, sparks were flying. And I was online after this. I was not the only person that had this thought. I love how in this episode we got the first mention of Skrulls. I was like, what if a Skrull did it? And is that a defense? I don't think that makes a lot of sense in this situation, since they caught you, presumably. So you would have to be a Skrull now. But I like the idea that people are trying that. Also, when you were watching it, my girlfriend thought that he suggested that perhaps it was squirrels and not Skrulls. And I think that is also fun in a world with Squirrel Girl, who is having her squirrels steal things in New York, specifically like candy. I think that could be fun. Episode 5 is the bank robbery episode. On one hand, I think this episode worked in that it was just full kind of Matt charisma vehicle. We were dealing a lot with the father from the Marvels, who I could not remember if had some sort of controversy, and now it's like one of those things where it's so hard to keep track of all this. I like that we're integrating these characters, the Miss Marvel characters and the Daredevil characters around New York. I would really like to see Hawkeye show up, although we do get a little bit of Hawkeye, which we'll talk about. I think where this episode lost me is I just wasn't that into the bank robbery. It felt really cliche, from the one cop doing all the negotiating to the Irish guys being really cavalier on the walkie-talkies. Like, the parts with Matt were great, but every time we had to go away from Matt to see something else, it just felt super flat. That being said, this episode also had a standout. This is a character played by an actor named Jimmy Palumbo, and he is one of the hostages. He's going to show up next episode as the guy who's like, hey, it's blood. That's bad. This guy is a classic New Yorker. I remember him from 2 episodes of television. 1, he was in Curb Your Enthusiasm. He was one of the doormen. And 2, he's in 30 Rock. He's one of the crew members who champions Liz Lemon after she doesn't get the flu shot. Not because she doesn't believe in it, but because there's a limited amount of flu shots. Either way, I do think that like some of the background actors in this show are really fun and feel very New York. There are a lot of character actors in here in other roles that really work for me, but I just want to point him out because he felt like the kind of actor that you could just see in the background of like Raimi Spider-Man 1. And that is a very specific kind of like superhero Marvel New York. And I loved it. But yeah, overall, this episode effective, but again, just so cliche. And it also leads into the big conspiracy and like this plot line with Fisk and Fisk's wife and who's trying to get the diamonds. And I couldn't care less. Not that I don't think these characters are interesting, but I don't think this plot is very interesting. And it feels like, yeah, I know she's a bad guy. He's a bad guy too. Both the Fisks are bad guys and they're both doing stuff behind each other's backs or whatever, and they're going to be fine with it. But I don't know. I just feel like there's certain elements of this season and like the through lines that I do find pretty compelling. Everything with Hector Ayala, everything with the Punisher, some of the Muse stuff, the Bullseye stuff, which we'll get into. But a lot of the Fisk crime stuff, I'm not as interested in. Fisk Mayor stuff, cool, interesting. But Fisk crime stuff just feels like something we kind of have to do because that's what Fisk was doing before. Although, like, how is he not in jail for all the things he did? And then you look at the news, it's like, oh, that's how. Episode 6. So episode 6 and 7 were the 2 Muse episodes. The theme of episode 6, and sometimes this show really beats you over the head with the themes. I do think episode 6 was a big one because it was just, they're the same. Matt Murdock and Wilson Fisk are actually quite similar in that they both are angry and they both fight, which, like, I guess is technically true. But, like, I do think there's a big difference between these characters, and I understand why it can be interesting to compare them. But, like, we'll have a character in episode 8 make another comparison between Matt and another vigilante, or, like, saying, oh, Daredevil and the vigilantes, they're all the same. And it's just this kind of both sides, like, of course they're not all the same. These characters are so different, all of them. Then I guess with Daredevil, if Daredevil had let Little White Tiger die, on that table because he wanted to be so brutal to Muse and killed Muse, but lost Little White Tiger. I'd be like, oh, okay. Maybe he's going a little bit further than he should be, the same way that Fisk is going further than he should with Adam. But because he's still daredeviling and like, I just don't think this is a humongous problem for him. I don't know. Either way, this is a good, well put together episode. Really fun fight sequences. I think the character of Muse is very cool looking. I do think he in the comics, because he's an Inhuman, has a superpower that kind of beats Matt's superpower and puts Matt at a real disadvantage. He just can't be perceived if he doesn't want to, I think. He's like a void of senses, and for Matt, who is extrasensory, like that is a huge problem. In this, they don't really get into any of that, and maybe they'll bring him back or something. And I don't think they need to. And I do think, and we'll see this in episode 7, I'm going to be kind of curious how this guy can beat up Daredevil, and I'm very interested in the answer we're going to get. But a lot of the stuff I found interesting in this episode was the Kingpin heavy stuff, but we got him doing his political wheeling and dealing. This is where we start doing more Kingpin fascism, and this is where we're going to introduce to Cole North, who is a character from the comics, who is the victim of character assassination on a level we have not yet seen in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, unless they're doing something very different with the way that his arc is going to play out or whatever. It seems like they've taken this character that is new and very specifically created for a purpose in the comics to be a good cop in the system who like doesn't like Daredevil, but needs to, you know, get more perspective, understand why Daredevil is important, and then ultimately like side with him. That is something that's very clear in the recent Zdarsky run. But the fact that in the show, he's instead just here for the vigilante fascism squad feels a little weird and feels like one of those things where someone's just like, what's the name from the, oh yeah, Cole North, that sounds good. But yeah, it just rings a little strange. I do think the star of this episode was Tony Dalton playing the swordsman again, a character who I both really enjoy and also someone who I don't know what the hell is going on with. Okay, so after Hawkeye, we learn he's kind of a fake out red herring villain, but it turns out he's just a very strange, somewhat eccentric sword collecting wannabe vigilante member of New York high society. He's got a lot of money. He's dating Kate Bishop's mom. He doesn't seem to be into Kate Bishop's mom for the money because he has plenty of his own money. And then when she, I'm assuming, goes to jail at the end of season 1, and Fisk doesn't, but I assume she does, then he just doesn't go to jail because he's not really involved in any of that. And I guess just becomes the swordsman, but is still a figure in New York high society. And there's part of me that's wondering as he goes and like faces off against Kingpin, I'm like, what would happen if these two guys fought? Because in the comics, the swordsman, I would say, is a bigger deal. And in the show, he's like a guy who puts on like a hoodie or something and uses a sword to stop crimes. But I don't know. Either way, I enjoy these little connections. The Skrull thing, Kamala's dad, now swordsman, all being part of the show that's set in New York feels very, you know, cinematic university, but also feels very like we just get to have this character who is, we know, he's a vigilante, rich high society guy, thinks he's Batman, is just really a guy with a fancy sword. And like, you can explain him more, but also it's like, yeah, you know who this guy is. He was in the Hawkeye show. I like that. But then this episode spins into the second episode where we learn that Muse is Heather's patient. I think in the show his name is Bastion, which is a name that after X-Men 97 should be off limits. I think this character is fine. Again, I feel like we're in a little cliche territory here, which I understand, like it's a superhero crime procedural, like in the vein of Batman, and how many of those can we possibly do? Is Muse feels very much like a character that would show up in Batman's Rogues Gallery. So of course he's going to feel somewhat familiar. I guess the scene where he reveals himself to Heather, I just think it was a little much, especially because at the same time we were getting his background, which included a history of being a Taekwondo master, which I think is funny because I'd be fine with him just being able to beat Matt because of like artistic superpowers or something, right? Like he studied the human form and also like artist suffering, so we can take a lot of punishment. But also he doesn't need to beat Matt because in the fights with Matt, he has a hostage that Matt has to save. So like that can give you enough. So when they say Taekwondo, it just sounds kind of silly. The fight with Muse is good. I do think Heather's arc is quite strange. First of all, in this episode, she is a psychiatrist who is supposed to be, at least in this episode, we see her doing more of her psychiatry, therapy, whatever it is, And she's supposed to be good at this, right? Because she's working for Wilson Fisk and hasn't like fully fixed his relationship or anything. But she seems to have been able to break through a little bit. But I think this episode is an interesting opportunity for Heather to have a psychiatry session with a villain and either try to talk her way out of it or try to examine her way into it. And like, I'm going to figure out everything about him. And like, I'm going to use my psychiatrist therapist powers against him, not to like trick him, but just to like make him, you know, realize the hurt he's doing to all these other people and stuff. They don't really do any of that, which I think is kind of boring for this situation. This is part of why I kind of wish this character was Moonstone, Carla Sofin, because it seems like what we are getting is the origin story for Heather, the maybe soon to be profiler, but right now therapist who has a big thing against superhero vigilante types, regardless of whether they are Muse and clearly a very disturbed person trying to do art with body parts and kill 60 people, or Daredevil, someone who has only been a good guy and has very publicly fought to protect the people of New York and like I don't think deserves this reputation. Now that it does kind of sound like we're setting her up as a little bit of an antagonist, now I'm like, do a full Moonstone, have her be a psychiatrist who like wants to get under these people's skin a little bit. I don't know. I just like Moonstone. I'm always looking for opportunities to put her in these. And obviously the MVP of this episode is an actor named Patrick Murney, who played Nico, only because at least one person on Twitter or Blue Sky or something was like, hey, this guy kind of looks like you. But to be honest, he's in the plot line I don't really like, but hey, you know, we look kind of similar, so that's cool. But okay, episode 8. This is important. This is a big episode. And this is one of the episodes, and we talked about this a little bit before. We know that Daredevil Born Again went through a lot of reworking. It seems like episodes 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 were all in the original plan for Daredevil Born Again. But it seems like episode 1 was going to be largely subtext, right? We were going to hear about that time that Foggy was killed. And you can see these moments slowly over the course of the first couple of episodes. Like we get a little mention of Foggy here and there. The Punisher at one point says Foggy, and also I believe says Bullseye off camera in like an ADR line. So that also feels like that was deliberately added after the fact. But, you know, we're hearing people talk about the anniversary and like we're seeing the program for the funeral. So it seems like we weren't going to see that in the beginning. And there were also people at Disney and Marvel who were unhappy that there wasn't a whole lot of Daredeviling in the beginning of the season. So they put Daredevil in, they showed the Foggy thing, we got a fight with Bullseye, some of it looked cool, some of it looked a little weird, but okay, so that was added. Episodes 8 and 9 apparently are also added stuff. And I can feel it just in terms of the filmmaking. The filmmaking in episode 8, I want to say it's better because I do think there's been some really good filmmaking, good editing, good cinematography, fight choreography, all that stuff in these other episodes. But episodes 1 and 8 look very similar. And I'm not just talking about some of the visual choices. I don't know. Episodes 1 and 8 have a very similar energy. A lot is happening. We're going for longer takes to up some drama. And yeah, obviously, you know, we're doing stuff with lighting. We're doing stuff with the aspect ratio changing when Matt's doing a super hearing, which never works for me. Every single time I see it, I think, oh, look, the aspect ratio is changing on this television show I'm watching, which is fine, but it kind of breaks the immersion in a way that I don't think is necessary. I think we can do like a zoom in, but specifically aspect ratios just fully take me out of stuff like this. That being said, I appreciate the effort, but this is an important episode and a fun episode because this is where all the characters start interacting. We get Matt and Fisk, we had Matt and Vanessa, Donald and BB, Swordsman and Fisk again. And also, this is Matt's crash out episode because Bullseye is free. I mean, he doesn't know he's free, but Bullseye is like doing stuff and now Fisk is involved and Matt just cannot handle that. And I like that. I like that these two characters have this relationship that is toxic to both of them. And the closer they get, the more their lives kind of start to unravel. I think that's fun. And I love Bullseye. This is the champion of this episode, obviously, is Wilson Bethel. And everything he was doing is so good. It definitely seems like bringing him in and making him full Bullseye was an after the fact, like reshoots and re-editing decision. I think it's fully worth it. He is great. The scene where he's killing everybody in the doctor's office is great. Like, he just feels very Bullseye. And I'm sure some people are like, well, what does that mean? His character is like a lot of different things. I guess, some people still think he's Colin Farrell in the other movie. But I think what I like about Wilson Bethel and what he brings to this performance that feels very deliberately Bullseye is that he is so intense. You never in any moment doubt that he would kill everybody in that room. Like, that is how you're supposed to feel about Bullseye. Sometimes you can pay him to do a murder or whatever, but also he's very passionate. It's very easy to get him worked up and like, I got to get revenge on this guy. Or just you make him angry and he'll kill you because that's how he operates. I don't know. I just really like him. I hope he gets a good costume. I know this is stupid fan stuff, but also I think Marvel's done a really good job of making Daredevil feel like a fixture of this universe and like feel like he fits right into this universe. And part of it feels like it's them committing and giving him this new costume in season 4, Born Again season 1 or whatever, that I think looks great. And it's the best Daredevil costume we've gotten on screen so far. I think Bullseye, a character that has evolved and had an outfit in episode 1 that was fine. I think at this point, Wilson Bethel has earned the Bullseye outfit. And also this character, assuming he survives this next episode, I hope he will have a reputation that's interesting. I'd love to see him on the Fisk task force. I'd love to see Fisk or some other character try to use him because that's what people always do. And because he is just fully out of his mind, but also he can be convinced to do things. I don't know. I really like him. I think he's really working here. This is kind of where Heather falls apart for me as a character. And for a lot of people, I'm sure this is the same thing. And it's a thing in television criticism for sure, where people get really, really critical of girlfriends or women in the lives of main characters, like Amber from Invincible, for example. And I'm not saying that all these characters are written perfectly, but I'm saying I don't want to like pile on this character who like in a year people are going to have like a bazillion thumbnails about us. She's the worst part of the show or something. But I think would have helped me with Heather is if I got a better perspective on why she right now in the show thinks Daredevil and Muse are like the same kind of guy. Because I understand why she would be scared of Muse, obviously. And I understand why she'd also be scared of Daredevil, because that experience was very traumatic for her. But she seemed really interested in the psychology of those characters. And like that was a very core part of Heather as like a character here, was she was going to psychologically unravel some of these guys. It feels like she's kind of given up on that, because I cannot see two characters that are more opposite than those two. And what I wonder and what I would like to see more of is, how do people outside of the sphere we're in, like the characters we spend time with, how does everybody else in New York feel about Daredevil? Because they've done a couple of little man on the street like, hey, what do you think about the White Tiger, the BB bits? And I even think they probably talked about Daredevil, and I think people were pretty sympathetic to Daredevil. The same way that Wilson Fisk can keep getting out of jail forever, and it's like unrealistic, but it's also like, hey man, there you go. That's what happens in real life too. I can see a world where Daredevil is just slandered by the press to the point where like everyone in New York has a negative opinion of him. But I definitely don't think he's earned that reputation, especially now. So because of that, Heather having such a negative opinion of Daredevil feels weird. Again, I'm not saying she has to be logical. I'm not saying everything has to make sense. I'm just saying this feels like a strange move for this character, and I'm wondering where they're going with it. But also, like, I wouldn't mind learning more about Daredevil in this universe. Like, how do other people that aren't obsessed with him like Fisk, how do they think about him? Everybody else in Matt's life seems to know he's Daredevil, so their opinions on Daredevil are all out there. But like, just your average guy, do they all go like, Daredevil, he's cool, like him? I don't know. It seems like the Punisher has like a cult of followers and stuff. I would imagine Daredevil would have the same thing. People are taking videos of the Swordsman, and he's not doing anything that great. And I'm not saying that the Swordsman is cool. I guess I'm just saying, like, especially because we're going to ramp up the anti-vigilante task force, I wonder, should I expect the city to fight back against that? Because also, this whole anti-vigilante thing feels very similar to the Superhuman Civil War, the Superhuman Registration Act, like the Sokovia Accords, which presumably also would apply to Daredevil, and presumably they don't exist anymore, but that is also just, I guess, ground that Marvel has covered before. However, like, in those movies, we really did know there were a lot of people that didn't like Iron Man and didn't like the superheroes for all the crazy stuff they did, and I just don't feel like we have that for Daredevil yet. Two bits I loved in this episode. One, when Vanessa told Matt that she knew he was Daredevil and kind of made a face. I thought that was fun. But number two, easily one of my highlights of the season, because we never see Fisk happy. He's sometimes like pleased with himself after like a big murder or something. He's like all juiced up and whatever, but never like just like smiley and like casual, like, hey, I'm having fun. The bit where he dances, and he's dancing with Vanessa, and he does little finger guns. It seems like one of the first genuine moments of like happiness, unencumbered by his years and years of trauma, I feel like I've ever seen out of him. And I'm sure that's just Vincent D'Onofrio being very charismatic, but very fun little moment. I liked it. And I liked the idea of Daredevil saving Fisk, because that's what Bullseye was talking about, is like, would you save your greatest enemy? And it's like, oh, Bullseye, you think that's so cute, you think you're my greatest enemy. You're not. But it's interesting because now Fisk, so anti-vigilante, is going to have to come out against Matt, who saved his life. So maybe this is going to be, he's going to be like, oh, you've got a head start, but after this I'm coming for you, or something. I don't know. But I think this dynamic is interesting. And I guess because we've seen so much like Batman and Joker, and this like, oh, you complete each other, you know, you're obsessed with him, and that's what's wrong with you, Batman, is all you really want is the Joker and whatever. Like, I just feel like more of that is not that interesting to me. Here's the big picture. I like what this season is setting up, because clearly it is part one of a 2-part season that was originally 18 episodes. It seemed to have been split into 2 9-episode seasons. This second half, after the fallout of next week, not knowing exactly what it is, but like kind of knowing what's going to happen just based on what it seems like is going to happen based on what they've set up, I think there's something really interesting there. I just wish that this season didn't feel so all over the place, right? Because we've talked about 5 episodes and they're all so different. The Muse episodes are so different from the bank robbery, so different from the Punisher arc, right? There's a little bit of connection, but it does feel like the show is lacking some of the cohesion that you would expect from a really well put together show like Daredevil season 3, for example. But all that said, I'm really enjoying it. The parts of the show that work are good effects, good fight choreography, looking good now, fun little characters that are popping up, great performances by the leads, and like a real sense of comic bookiness and like a good mixture of both the seriousness and the tone of Daredevil without sacrificing what I think makes this character fun and different from so many other versions of like a guy who fights crime. You know, I don't think we're sacrificing that, and I appreciate it. But we will see. Episode 9 comes out next week. I'll do a recap there. And if you want to see that recap before anybody else does, you got to check out Nebula. It is a subscription streaming service that I helped to create with a bunch of my other YouTube friends. People you definitely know if you like my channel, like Patrick Willems, Captain Midnight, Big Joel, H Bomber Guy, Princess Weeks, and a bunch of others. Go to the culture tab and just poke around. You will find someone you already love. And for my Nando V Movies and Nando Cut videos, the entire Nando Cinematic Universe, they all go up early on Nebula. The Nando V Movies videos are usually a week early. The Nando Cut videos are usually closer to a day or so. But when it comes to a movie review, that can mean the difference between me recommending you immediately see a movie like Deadpool and Wolverine, or me warning you that you immediately see a movie like Madam Web. Either way, see Madam Web. Madam Web's great. Also, if you've seen these ads in the past, you've definitely seen me talk about Abolish Everything, a new show that was coming to Nebula. Well, they recorded it, and it came to Nebula, and it's great. It is so funny. I had such a good time watching it. Check out the trailer online, and then definitely go watch an episode. I don't know if you guys are like me, but this is the kind of thing I could watch full seasons of. You can also download videos to the Nebula app and watch them wherever you want. And we're adding new creators every day. We have guest passes. It's really incredible. And speaking of incredible, Nebula is already a steal at $60 a year, $5 a month. But if you go to go.nebula.tv/thenandocut, you can get a year of Nebula for $36. That is $3 a month. It's an incredible deal. Again, go to go.nebula.tv/thenandocut. You're going to love it. Thank you so much, everybody. That's all I got. Stay safe. I'll see you next time.